For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. I think we can all agree that losing weight is hard. If it was so easy, then everyone would be able to do it. No one would be obese, and we would all live to be in perfect health and condition and live 100 years. That's not the way the world works, as I think you can figure out. Losing weight is a struggle for many people, and the weight of the average adult has gone up on a year-to-year basis. There are a lot of things that you have to do in order to lose weight, and oftentimes at the same exact time. You have to eat better, you have to diet, you have to work out and find the time to work out, and you have to push yourself and make sacrifices that you otherwise wouldn't make. However, with all that being said, if I said that there was $1 million and the rest of your career on the line, and all you had to do was lose a fairly inconsequential amount of weight, I think most of us would probably take that deal and be able to do it. I'm not talking about dropping from 300 pounds to 130 pounds in a week. I'm talking about dropping a couple of pounds over a 3-month stretch. I think most of us, knowing that if you didn't hit this, your career would be over, and you potentially miss out on 6 or 7 figures, would be able to accomplish this with ease. It is a very attainable goal. Speaking of goals, one of my goals is to hit 60,000 subscribers as we try and build the best football community on the platform to talk about all things NFL history all the time. So if you like what you see, be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you don't miss a single video that we post, because we post every single day on this channel. Thanks in advance for your support. Well, I bring all that up because this player that you've been watching this entire time is Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver David Dunn. And he went from a reliable third down target to off the team and a complete non-factor overnight because he was deemed too fat to play in the league, which is kind of a big deal when you're a wide receiver. Showing up to camp overweight? Not really a huge story. Plenty of players have weight issues in the offseason, and then they find a way to lose the weight. But showing up to camp overweight, having literally months to shed the weight, and then coming back to camp with no progress being made? Well, that deserves a deep dive roughly a quarter century later, especially because this story takes a twist at the end that you might not see coming. Because this is the story behind Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver David Dunn, and the receiver who was deemed too fat to play by the coaching staff and by the organization. Before I talk about the actual incident in question regarding his weight and just how bad everything got, we need some context to understand, when he was actually healthy and on the field, who David Dunn was, and how good of a receiver he was. After the Bengals drafted Dunn in the 5th round of the 1995 NFL Draft, taking the Fresno State wide receiver with the 139th pick in the draft, I think the Bengals thought they had a hidden gem on their hands. The 1995 draft class was abysmal for Cincinnati. They had 6 draft picks, including the number 1 overall pick, which they spent on Penn State running back John Carter. And none of those picks really did anything of note with Cincy. That was, except for Dunn, who was not only a very good return man on special teams, but was an excellent third down receiver. If you looked at Dunn's stats, you have to also look at them with the context that 90% of those catches were coming on third down. He was the poor man's version of Wayne Corbett. He was Cincinnati's version of what was happening in New York with the Jets, where every time there was a third down situation, you knew the ball was going into Dunn's hands, and you knew that he was going to catch it and move the sticks. If you're a Jaguars fan, he was their Brian Walters. In 1996, he had 32 catches for 509 yards, and he followed that up in 1997 with 27 catches for 414 yards. Are the numbers otherworldly? Obviously not. However, in the appropriate context of being a clutch receiver who could extend drives and get open on third down, he was fantastic and was a bright spot on some actually good Bengal offenses. After proving himself over the last 3 seasons, it seemed like things were going swimmingly for David Dunn heading into the 1998 season. And then came the team's minicamp. This was a big year for Dunn. He was entering his 4th year in the league, and he had established himself as a reliable threat on the Bengals as that 3rd down option. He could have potentially been in line for a big contract with a good season and with some maturity when it came to his weight, because that had been a bit of an issue with him in the past. In 1995, when he was a rookie, he showed up to camp out of shape. And in 1996, as a second-year player, he wasn't in the best of shape either. Said wide receiver coach John Garrett at the time, "The incumbent, David Dunn, is out of shape and is too heavy to play." Because of that, there is going to be competition heating up. David has his work cut out for him. He knows he can't play at the weight he's at. And Dunn said that entering the 1996 season, "I got too laid back this offseason. I picked up a lot of extra weight. Anytime I take a break, I pick up weight real easy. I've been like that all my life. The Bengals weren't happy, and I wasn't happy. Hopefully, I'll get down and be able to perform as usual." Now, to be fair to Dunn in 1996, he did manage to do that. And even though camp started off rough that year, as he was unable to finish wind sprints at the start because he was too tired, he was able to return to form and be that number 3 wide receiver for the team. But in 1998, oh boy. Because when minicamp started in 1998, David Dunn, at 6'3", weighed a whopping 240 pounds. I want to put into some perspective just how heavy that is for a wide receiver to weigh 240 pounds. During the 1998 season, there were 16 wide receivers in the NFL who stood at exactly 6'3" tall, since it wouldn't make any sense for me to compare Dunn and his weight to that of a 5'9" receiver. You can see the weight of all of those players, ranging on the low end from New England Patriots wide receiver Vincent Brisby at 190 pounds, to San Francisco 49ers player and future Hall of Famer Terrell Owens at 224 pounds. On average, you're looking at the average 6'3" receiver in 1998 being somewhere in the ballpark of 210 pounds, which lines up very similarly to what it is today in 2024. And you can see all of those receivers plotted on that neat little bar graph. Now, let's put David Dunn at his 240 pounds on that graph, and holy cow, he is in a whole other stratosphere. This is like the Family Guy scene where Peter is in a whole other stratosphere with his weight, to the point where he has his own gravitational pull. He isn't just heavy for a 6'3" wide receiver. He's incredibly out of shape, and he didn't weigh 240 pounds with muscle, I can tell you that much. BMI isn't the best measurement out there, and it has a ton of flaws. But Dunn's BMI at 6'3", 240 pounds, was 30, making it the worst BMI of any wide receiver during the 1998 season, and putting him in the obese category. Again, BMI is not great, and it does not count for a lot of things. But that's just to give you an idea of what we were dealing with as it pertained to this man right here, David Dunn. Head coach Bruce Coslett was understandably fuming about this. Dunn was an important part of the team on paper, and once again, he was having trouble keeping his weight down. The first time in 1995? Okay, that can be excused to some extent because you have no idea what to expect going from college to the NFL. The second time in 1996? Even that can be somewhat excused because you've never had a full offseason before. These are not great excuses, but at least there's some justification. But again, and to show up weighing 240 pounds when you're a veteran? Inexcusable. And with that, Bruce Coslett decided to send a message and send Dunn home. "You're not playing for us at that playing weight," said Coslett. "I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm tired of it. It's not fair to me, and it sure isn't fair to their teammates." Team president Mike Brown wholly supported Coslett's decision, saying on the decision to kick Dunn out of minicamp, "It may help to be less tolerant of this type of thing. We've tried to work with guys in all kinds of ways to improve their conditioning. Maybe it's time just to say, we won't accept that any longer. When you're ready to go as you should be, we'll be pleased to have you try. Until then, don't bother us." In other words, we've tried the soft, comforting approach. Maybe tough love is what we need. Maybe the only way to get through is through ultimatums. Kozlov then added, in what was a direct shot at Dunn, I just got fed up with the same guys doing the same thing year in and year out. You have to have a certain sense of responsibility. When you prove to me you're irresponsible over a number of years, I'm going to react. And it seems like players on the Bengals had no problem with this decision, with cornerback Ashley Ambrose saying, Bruce is fed up with us being an average team. He wants us to be above average, and it's got to start with him being tough in minicamp. Side note, I love that Ashley Ambrose said that Kozlov's ambitions for the team is to be above average. Not great, not good, just above average. However, Ambrose added, I don't blame Kozlov for being like this. A lot of people have to take it a lot more seriously. Regardless, the man you've been watching this whole time, David Dunn, was on the outside looking in for the moment. But there was a chance at redemption. This minicamp was in early May, and training camp was in late July. So Dunn had plenty of time to lose the weight. He needed to get down from 240 pounds to 220 pounds, so he needed to drop 20 pounds. Considering the fact that your body fluctuates anywhere from 4 to 7 pounds on a daily basis, based on your water retention and how many trips you made to the bathroom, this should not be too hard for a professional athlete to do. If you're even close to 220, again, considering that fluctuation, they'll give it to you. It's like a teacher rounding up if you've got an 89.5. And again, as things stood, while this was incredibly frustrating, this was a non-story. Plenty of players show up overweight and out of shape, and then they do what they need to do so that they can be at their appropriate playing weight, and it's water under the bridge. Heck, Dunn wasn't even the only Bengal kicked out of minicamp. Linebacker James Francis had that same issue, although that was a non-story because he lost the requisite weight that he needed to and ended up starting 14 games and started week 1, hence why we're not talking about him. So now was the moment of truth. It was late July, roughly 80 days after the last time Dunn was on the field in minicamp and was sent home by his coach. He had what was, in essence, an entire summer vacation's worth of time to lose the weight, or at least make a concentrated effort to do so. Heck, in many parts of New York, he had more than an entire summer vacation worth of time to lose the weight. With that, he got to camp. He stepped on the scale at Georgetown College, and he learned his number. And the end result?
Nothing.
That's right, nothing. Because when Dunn weighed in, he didn't just not meet the weight that he needed to be at, he was nowhere close. Because instead of being 240 pounds, he was now a whole 237 pounds. For all intents and purposes, that's exactly the same weight, considering body fluctuation and all that jazz. He had nearly 3 months to get into playing shape and dropped 20 pounds with his entire football career and a potentially huge contract on the line, and he ended up losing absolutely nothing. This is the Office meme asking you to identify the difference in the two pictures, and they're the same picture. That's exactly what this was with David Dunn. There is no difference between 240 and 237, relatively speaking. In fact, let's do that right now. Let's show that graph that I showed earlier with 6'3" receivers. But this time, we'll adjust Dunn's weight so he's weighing 237 pounds instead of 240. Whoop-de-freaking do! Do you notice a difference? Because I don't. In fact, you know how I know you don't notice a difference? Because I didn't even change the graph. That's the same exact graph. This is the graph that adjusts the weight to 237 pounds. It's the exact same thing. Good job. Just really good job all the way around. When Dunn showed up to camp, Kozlov was asked to assess how Dunn was doing. He responded by saying, "Not very good." Was he in better shape than he was in May during minicamp? In Kozlov's blunt words, no. And at the start of the season, as you can probably expect, When Dunn was still unable to keep that weight under control, Coslet and the Bengals finally and understandably had enough, and decided to cut the man, with Coslet saying on the decision, "We were finally fed up. We hoped he'd come around, he never did, and we were forced to take action to protect the team." I want to emphasize in case it wasn't clear, Dunn had a roster spot locked up. He was a very solid number 3 receiver. He was going to be starting. He was going to be getting a ton of reps. He was going to be in line for a nice contract that would have set him up for life if he was smart about it. All he had to do was put in the slightest bit of effort when it came to his weight, and he'd be good. Instead, he went ahead and did this, and completely blew it. Said General Manager Mike Brown, "He's always resisted getting in shape and staying in shape. I'm not going to have him make his problems our problems any longer. We're going to go on and get someone who's in shape, who can run and perform as he should." And if you think the story ends here, oh, don't you worry. It gets even crazier, because it goes down a completely new rabbit hole that no one saw coming. Because after being cut by the Bengals for weight issues, Dunn took to the press to say that the weight issues weren't the reason that he got cut. Instead, it was just a giant cover-up. Said Dunn, "I said some words to Coslet, and he said some words to me, and I was released for it. That's why I was cut. It's not the weight, that's just a cover-up." Yeah, sure. You come to camp at 240 pounds, by your own admission, you're wildly out of shape, you end up not losing any weight whatsoever when minicamp starts, everyone on the team says that you're too overweight and fat to play, you get cut, and you think it's a giant cover-up? Especially when the words to Coslet were about the weight issue? How does that make any sense? If I work for a pizza delivery company, and I have a history of wrecking the company car, and on this last one, I wreck it while speeding and going through a red light while being on my phone, and they fire me, I would look like a moron to say, the wreck wasn't why they fired me. That's a cover-up because the boss didn't like me. Like, no, it was the weight. It was 100% the weight. I can guarantee you that it was not a cover-up for anything. Not when everything was so well documented for a long period of time. Dunn then added, "They were all praising me and telling me how much they needed me this year in the offense. Then, they do this. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, that's because they thought you were going to be in shape. That's because they didn't think you were going to be unable to do anything. If I tell someone in a pickup basketball game, I'm looking for you on this play, I'll find you with the pass. That's under the assumption that the player is going to work to make himself open. If that player decides to stand in the backcourt 85 feet away from the hoop with the shot clock winding down, no, I'm not getting him the ball on that possession. The circumstances changed." Naturally, Coslet said, "None of this is true," which, I mean, duh. I think Bruce Coslet is a horrible coach and had no business being in charge of all these teams for so long. But considering what we knew about the situation, I'm inclined to believe him here. Either way, David Dunn blew it. He blew his chance for the dumbest reason possible. As for what happened to the man who played for this team behind me right here, David Dunn still played in the NFL after this, as he played until 2001, although he never really had a permanent home. He bounced around between the Pittsburgh Steelers, the expansion Cleveland Browns, and the Oakland Raiders, and he did next to nothing after leaving Cincinnati, as he was relegated to special teams duty at best. From a receiving standpoint, what he did in Cincinnati was a far cry from what he did for the rest of his career, as after leaving the Bengals, he had 15 catches for 132 yards and no receiving touchdowns. That was it. From an offensive standpoint, Dunn was done. From a third down pass catching standpoint, Dunn was done. From a catching the ball standpoint, Dunn was done. Basically, no matter how you want to slice it, after leaving Cincinnati due to his weight issues and everything else, Dunn was done. And like I said at the start of the video, losing weight is tough and is hard. But I can tell you this much. If you have a job and hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars on the line, and you need to lose about 15 pounds in 3 months because you are way too overweight for anyone, let alone an NFL player, and you can't even lose a single pound, then I don't know what to tell you. I just don't. And then, to think that the reason you were cut wasn't because of your weight, and it was a cover-up for something else, even though there was concrete proof that you, very obviously, were not in good shape to play, and had a pattern of doing this, and the coach and the organization reached their breaking point? Delusion at its finest. This is a forgotten story from that disastrous 90s era of the Cincinnati Bengals, but it's one that deserves to be remembered all these years later for just how insane it is. Because in 1998, I think it's safe to say that this man right here, David Dunn, bungled his weight with the Bengals. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.